Welcome, one and all, to the LJL 2021 Spring Split Finals between DetonatioN FocusMe and V3 Esports. I am honoured to be your host and play-by-play caster for the day, Samuel Initialize Hapgood. I am joined by an incredible crew of guests, namely Counterfeit, Maple Street, and Joshi, all joining us for the day. It's incredible to have you all. Before we do get any further, we do want to wish Masked Swan a very speedy recovery. He would be hosting today as expected. Sadly, he's fallen somewhat ill, so we wish him a lot of love. We want to see him back on desk as soon as we can. But until then, I'm sure he'll be in chat, throwing his love out there. Throw some love towards him. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. But I and the rest of my crew here have got to get down to business, talking about this incredible looking matchup. Before we get there, of course, gents, pleasure to have you all. Joshi, nice to see you, buddy.
It's good to finally be on here, you guys. It's very exciting. And I have to say, on the one hand, I hope that Alex gets better soon. On the other hand, it means that they don't have to wake up at the crack of dawn in order to be part of this. Maple and I, we're over here in America. Yeah. We're trying to stay up super late. You guys got to wake up super early. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in and staying up at odd hours in order to participate in this broadcast.
I don't know. We got lucky. Like, they moved the time up for some reason, and now it's like perfect time for us.
I'm just very glad, Counterfeit, you're here and awake with me, buddy. Like, you've joined us along with our beautiful producer Patrick here at the crack of dawn in the UK to be doing this. Glad to have you on the desk, man.
I mean, certainly everyone in the UK was setting alarm after alarm, multiple redundancies to try and make sure we're here. I'm not convinced that I'm not still asleep, so I will take things as they come.
Yeah, who knows? This could all be a fever dream. Yeah, I could still be having a nightmare about failing
TSM hasn't lost yet.
Definitely haven't lost themselves, I'll tell you what.
It's a little too early in the morning for these jokes. All right, let's move on a little bit and set ourselves up a few of these narratives, because this is a bit of a storied matchup, gents. Maple, if you want to take us through a little bit about what's going on here, because it feels like we've seen this whole road before last summer.
Well, pretty much, like, DFM has been at the top of the league for so many years now, and last year was quite a big upset with V3. Well, I guess DFM wasn't in the best form, but V3 just dunked on DFM in the finals, and now it's a rematch of the same teams, but the players are different on both sides.
Been pretty much that. Last summer, of course, DFM had a rough split. I think it was their worst split ever, to remind everybody. They'd never before had a less than an 80% win rate in the LJL, which was fairly impressive as far as stats go. They have a rough summer, and then they managed to climb their way all the way up the playoff bracket, all the way from round one. There's some 5-game series, and they make their way to the finals versus V3, where they lost that one. If that sounds a little bit familiar, it's because we've managed to invert them, haven't we, Joshi? V3, not the best end of the split, but they've managed to make it to the finals all the same.
They have, and it's kind of interesting at this point, Initialize, just to think about it, right? It's not common that we say somebody other than DFM is the defending champs of V3. They went to Worlds last year. They didn't have the best performance, but we got to excuse them a little bit. They had multiple people with their first opportunity to play internationally, and we can kind of see all the pressure get to them. And so now they have an entirely new roster, not entirely new, but mostly new roster coming at it this time. They're going to have an opportunity to try and play at the mid-season invitational, but they got to get through what might be the strongest roster that LJL has ever seen.
Basically true. Exodia's not quite complete yet. Of course, they've still got their coach in for a support to DFM, but it's only a month or so until that final piece, the right leg of Exodia gang, can come and join the roster. Till then, we are probably going to be seeing Arya and Kazu in the lineup, but we'll get on to that bit a little bit later. Counterfeit, we've kind of been setting up some of these narratives. DFM versus 3-3. It's a hell of a rivalry, mate.
Oh, sure, and just to touch back on what Joshi was saying a little bit before, as much as it was a disappointing performance for V3 in Worlds, it's the same for DFM as well. Not managing to make a big impact there. I mean, with this being the qualifier for MSI, I feel like, certainly DFM have got a historical advantage here. They should have been in for 2020, but of course, the coronavirus caused it all to get cancelled. So if that had happened, And if they do manage to make it through today, that would be 3 in a row of recent times, at least, to MSI. So that's impressive stuff.
It definitely is. And yes, there's been some changes to both squads. Of course, after the results of last summer, we did see DFM finally shift that age-old roster they've been running for so long. One of the most tenured players in the world. Seros, who was only behind Faker in terms of tenure alongside Utapon. That's how long they've been with a single organization, those two players. And Seros finally sort of stepping away a little bit here for this incredible player, of course, in Aria. And as we said, winner does get to go on to MSI. It's a bit of a rough group draw, if anybody's seen it. LCS and LCK. But exactly, it should be incredibly exciting. It should be great experience. Not sure how strong the chances are of victory, but frankly, who cares? You're going to be playing against the likes of Showmaker. And what might be either Perks or Jensen as well, which is not a bad little lineup of some of those mid laners for the likes of Aria stuff to be going into. But I think at this point, gents, we probably ought to be diving into some more in-depth analysis of our team. So let's turn our eyes to Detonation. FocusMe. Joshi, we kind of mentioned it. This squad for DFM, it is the super team. They have built a ridiculously great roster for this split.
Yeah, I believe it was, was it you Initialize or was it Nymeria who was saying that the best way DFM is going to have success internationally is if they bring in Aria, right? This superstar mid laner coming in from Korea, kind of taking the region by storm. You can hear it.
He's over there somewhere.
That it was, this superstar coming in, but as you already said, they needed to bring in another Japanese player in order to fulfill all of their import requirements. And now, as we look across it, Aria has been having a fantastic split. And with a number of other players like Nahyun coming in from Korea, he has shown no signs of really slowing down. And interestingly enough, he's one of the few players in the region that is actually willing to play assassins. He's able to play the mages quite proficiently, but he's also someone that we've been seeing a little bit more like Akali and Kiana play coming out of. So I'm excited to see how he's going to be able to really bully his way through up against somebody like Ashe, who has historically been much more of a supportive mid.
Absolutely, with perhaps the exception of his Syndra and his Syndra Zoe LeBlanc, but he's got quite a limited pool of those champions. You're absolutely right to call that out. Maple Street, you want to jump in here as well? Anything else you want to call out about DFM a little while we're talking about them here?
Yeah, well, talking a bit about Aria, when he broke into the LJL, he was immediately like one of the top 2 players along with Dasher. And he had the most solo kills for multiple splits in a row.
Yeah.
And he plays a lot of different champions, and it's almost to his detriment. Because I remember 2019, my team, Sengoku at the time, was playing against him, and he brought out Talon. And I'm like, what the hell? Who the hell plays Talon? And we got a win off that. we got a win off that, and I'm like, okay, I didn't expect that. I didn't plan for it, but at some point you might want to limit your champion pool a bit and not go to Talon. Okay. But he is very flexible.
Wise words from the former Sengoku coach. Maple going, yeah, maybe don't just pull out Talon because you can, Still, you've got to appreciate the confidence, even if it's sometimes to your detriment. Counterfeit. Sounds like you've got a couple other stats you want to be bringing up for us here.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Aria and Kazu, certainly quite impressive. I did want to point out some other strong stats we got from the DFM side. Steel, in the jungle, has got the best KDA right now, with 36 assists, having only died twice total.
That's quite impressive.
And for Utapon as well, in the AD carry position, most kills in a single game at 13 on Ezreal versus Rascal Jester, and the only player in the playoffs so far to have locked down a quadra kill.
Couple fantastic stats we're working with. Of course, the Ezreal battle in the Juggernaut match between Sol and Udapon was something to behold, and eventually it turned out to be a little bit of a trap in that final 4th game for poor old Rascal Jesters, who in the end did fall down to V3 as well yesterday. So it'll be an interesting one to keep our eyes on. Just got to remember, this has just been a ridiculously dominant split, right? DFM went like 12-2 in the regular season. They 3-1'd Rascal Jesters pretty convincingly. They've got the 2-0 record over V3 in the spring season. They've definitely got a weight of statistics behind them coming into this finals. Yeah. One last little subject before we kind of turn our eyes to V3 for a moment or two. We're talking about this 5-man roster, of course, of Arya in the mid lane, and then Kazu in support. Of course, if anybody isn't aware at this point joining in just for finals, Kazu is effectively DFM's coach, or one of them. He's an ex-pro player, so it's not like he's just some random with a decent ELO account, like he is a former pro player, but he's not been playing professionally consistently for quite a while. He stepped in to deal with the import restrictions. Steel becomes a resident in summer, and therefore they're able to bring in their starting support of Gang, but until then, they've got a coach stepping in, and there is a world, right, where potentially Seros and Gang switch in for Arya and Kazu, right, Maple?
There is a world, but I mean, Arya.
Thank you for the phrasing there. There is a world. I don't think it's going to be happening, is what you're suggesting.
You don't
to
sound
me
very
with that.
confident.
Yeah, I mean, Arya has been, I would say, the best player in the league this season, and Seros did not look that great in the few games he did sub in. So they did get one loss in the regular season subbing in Seros, and I don't know, like Gang is incredibly good, but yeah.
To me, it's like this interesting thing, right? Because we've been seeing DFM as historically a team that has been carried by Evi up in the top lane and Utapone down in the bottom lane, right? They're these big damage dealers. They're used to getting a lot of resources because Seros and Steel play so selflessly. They give so much over to everybody else. But now that Arya comes in, he demands a lot of resources, and Evi and Utapone, who aren't as used to playing with low resources, have still been having success, but it's not the way that we know that they've played. And I think it is one of those things where if you just bring back Seros and Gang obviously one of the best laning supports in the entire league, and Seros will allow Evi and Utapone to play up to their strength. So I think, I don't think it's likely that we see them. I think it will probably restrict them a little bit, but if Arya's having a bad day, or if Evi or Utapone are like really popping off, and it's like, hey, give me money and I will carry this series, I think that's when we're going to see Seros step in.
Absolutely. We'll keep our eyes on that. It's another card to play, or rather, I suppose, another two cards to play. We had a little clip play over on stream there as well. Just Ebi and Arya, probably the two best solo laners in the league, just styling a little bit on some top dives. It's a little unfair when you can start running a Kali Zoe on like random lanes, and this flexibility in champion pool and playstyle, and just getting to do that. And it's best. It's pretty damn terrifying. Yeah, as you said, there is also a world where maybe they just need to bring in Seros to have a little bit of a lower economy player in the mid lane, get someone with a little bit more laning prowess in the bot lane. I suppose at this point, Patrick, if you wouldn't mind rolling us some Kazu clips, because we've been doing this.
Survive for 5 seconds, but I think if his champion pool gets challenged, it might be a problem in game, because we've seen Kazu sometimes die in lane in very awkward situations where maybe him and Utapon are not on the right page.
Absolutely, and to kind of speak about that, here's a play of exactly that. Kazu just going a little deep in the bot lane. I don't know whether you've seen this play, but you can react in real time.
I mean, this is what I've been promised to see, is just over-aggression, tons of blood. This is what I'm here for.
I knew, like, I saw it in the run of show, like, this clip was going to come up, and still, it just, like, pains me to watch, because, I wrote this article a while back. I'll talk about it more tonight, but, when we get more into predictions, but DFM is the only team that has beaten DFM so far this spring split. And sometimes it's not even DFM beating DFM. Sometimes it is Kazu beating DFM. So as long as we don't see that version, right? Like, that's the part where it's like, all right, sorry, Ari, we know you're doing great, but Kazu is having a rough night. We gotta get Gang in here before we lose the rest of our games. So I think it's okay. I think they should do fine. Nobody's challenged his champion pool just quite yet. They haven't really exposed a lot of his weaknesses because how strong the rest of the team are. But it does raise some interesting spots where we've all had a couple of question mark pings coming out whenever we see him take it.
Okay, so with that little bit of, we'll call that the segue, over to talk about our contenders in V3 Esports, because while DFM might be the only team to have beaten DFM, V3 Esports would really like to change that narrative today. Maple, V3, tell me a little bit more about what we're expecting from this squad coming in. It's been a bit of a rougher road for them to get to the finals.
Yeah, they've definitely been changing throughout the season. Like, coming in, everyone always expects the Korean players are going to be the hard carries of the team. Like, that's what most LJL teams think of. They just grab the best Korean players. But V3 had a very solid Japanese base last season when they had Paz, Ace, and Rhina. All three of those players, I would say, were in the top 3 of their role. So if you have a really solid Japanese base, then you add 2 Korean players, like, it generally works pretty well in LJL. So, but early on in the season, they, I guess, had a lot of trouble figuring out how they wanted to win the game. Hollow wasn't great on champions like Kaisa. It was a bit of a struggle early on, but in playoffs, they've, like, turned it up. They've completely upset Sengoku and RJ on their way to the finals. So it's just working really well, and Cog has been absolutely a beast in playoffs so far.
Yeah, he has, and I think we even got a little bit of a clip to pull on this one. The long and short of it, ladies and gentlemen, is think twice about giving this man Nah. This particular play was pretty disgusting to watch. Watch him in there, Counterfeit. Tell me about this little play. Should you be grouping in the Baron Pit for a 4-man Nah like that?
I mean, hopefully we'll get a chance to touch on this a little bit later on, but I think Cog, as you saw there, given the opportunity, can make an absolute statement, and I'm hoping during our upcoming series they get that opportunity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Joshi, I know you probably want to jump in here because you were telling me as well, like a little bit, because you've kind of got your own kind of thoughts on Cog. You were saying like, he feels like he's not been around for ages, and yet he kind of has at this point.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, he kind of burst onto the scene in like 2017, which was, for me, a couple years in, like, he had always been there just hovering around, but he hadn't really made a name for himself for quite a while. But for me, a couple things stick out, right? Obviously, Evi's Gnar, super, super good. Cog's Gnar, also super, super good. Something that's going to be very contested in the pick ban tonight, which is, exciting for me as a big Gnar player, but also a little bit worrying because Gnar is a thing that has a lot of really bad matchups that just haven't really surfaced particularly well in Japan. But the other thing is, I feel like so much of V3's success is going to be riding off the back of Cog. Even back when he was playing on like Rascal Gesture, was paired with players like Wyvern in particular, it was the kind of player where you either pop off or you lose, and there's not really a whole lot of in between, and that hasn't really changed even now. I mean, Mugen, stronger jungler than Wyvern was historically, but it is still a situation where Cog, he's a feast or famine player. He doesn't necessarily play feast or famine champions, but one of my favorite players in the North American region, the amateur, Pi Cake Lord. Can he lane? Can he not lane? Is he going to be the best player in the entire region, or is he going to show up at all? So we'll see how it ends up working out today.
Counterfeit, you want to jump in here?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to follow up that with, if we're looking back at the regular season between V3 and DFM, Cog's the only player who's managed to lock down a solid performance of the 2 games they played against each other. So absolutely hoping, again, they get the chance to do the same here.
And that's kind of why we're highlighting him a little bit here. He's had a split where he's been enabled to play everything from Ivern to Tristana top. He had a little bit of a tougher time towards the end of the split, but that's basically because V3 changed the way they were playing a little bit, went for some odd 1-3-1 poke comps with no engage. It's like, that's very stylish, guys. It's very sort of highbrow, but you've got to be able to actually win with it, and they weren't quite able to do that. But in playoffs, they've gone back to the old faithful of team fighting, and Cog has been leading the charge on that one. Phenomenal performances in both the semi-finals and their round 2 matchups against Sengoku and Rascal Jesters, respectively. And hopefully here against Ebi and likely steal that top 2v2 could be oh so important if V3 have a chance of winning today. Speaking of, though, let's turn our eyes over to the jungler of V3 Esports, because there's another bit of a revelation. They just seem to pick up. PCS junglers do V3 Esports, and they seem to turn up and be really good. They had Boogie last year. They've got Mugen this year, don't they, Maple?
Yeah, they do. Early on in the season, like, I think Mugen was like spamming Nidalee, and it didn't work out that well. But now that he has champions that play a lot of crowd control, like the Udyr and the Lilia, they've just gotten a lot of good ganks off. So I think they have good communication on how to set up waves and gank for each other. And cohesively as a team, like they're really good around Mugen when he's bringing a bit of crowd control. The lanes set him up, and they just get really good pressure from him.
Speaking of lane setting up, we've got a
thing to watch out. That's what we call a segue around here. Yeah, he's definitely been pathing really well. But one of the things that I kind of want to address again is, I'll have a lot of thoughts about the draft whenever we come back to this. But one of the big things that has kind of been hurting V3 in some ways is the fact that Mugen doesn't really play Hecarim, right? You don't really see him play it. In fact, he's one of the few junglers that just has basically not played it at all. He played it once against the Hawks earlier, or like a couple of weeks ago, and that was really it. It's not something that you necessarily see a lot. It is this kind of gaping hole in his champion pool. He has been falling back to things like the Lilia. He has been bringing things like the Nidalee out, and against a lot of junglers that are trying to build this high economy and are willing to take coin flips with you, it can be very successful. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how it stacks up against Steel, who's going to be like, no, you can have those Raptors. I'm going to go farm this instead. I'll see you in 30 seconds when we have another opportunity to fight, because I just don't need to right now. I'll just give this up and not take any opportunities to lose the game, and I'm not sure how Mugen's going to be able to respond to that.
I press the E key and suddenly I'm there. I'll just Hecarim things. I'm across the map in just moments. Of course, got to give some credit over to Mugen. He did deal with Matches Hecarim pretty well yesterday. The first pick really didn't work out for the Jesters.
That's why they picked it 3 times in a row.
Have you got any thoughts on that in particular? Like sardonic statements there?
I don't know. RJ just kept picking the same thing over and over, and then it just didn't work into the Gnar. The top lane got smashed so hard, but
did a little.
Poor Kinatsu, dude. Kinatsu will have his day, but he just wasn't yesterday.
In fairness, for a rookie coming in, he's pretty incredible really for Kinatsu, who can make his way all the way up to a juggernaut match, second place regular season, and then of course he had to deal with playoffs, V3 and DFM, which is a tall order, especially moving on to stage and the rest of it. So I'll give some credit over for the poor man and his rookie split, even if Maple is exactly right to kind of like call out like, maybe there might have been a world where changing up in draft might have been constructive.
Yeah. I don't know, it was a bad day for him. He didn't really have the right counter to Gnar, and for some reason they just didn't switch up their draft, so they put him in a tough situation. But speaking of the jungle matchup, Steel has played 8 games of Olaf this year, so he doesn't really have a much wider pool than Mugen in terms of like recency, but Olaf has been somewhat falling out of favor, it feels like, in the most recent patches. And I'm not sure if they want to value that.
The most recent time he played it was still like 2 weeks ago, when it was not super good, but with the Stridebreaker changes, it was still viable. But he has been, I just ripped on Mugen for not playing Hecarim. It's one of the things that Steel has been playing quite a bit, because it is super strong with the recent Triforce changes. It also can build damage once again. I don't expect Steel to do that. He's just not that kind of player, but the option is there. If he gets a couple of kills, like,
yeah,
all right, guys, it's time for me to do some damage. They can still do that, but it is a thing where we have historically looked at Steel as this much more supportive player, very willing to play things like the Sejuani, whereas Mugen is a much bigger part of their actual carry potential. So it's going to be an interesting thing, and we'll get to talk more about the bottom lane later on and see how impactful they are, because it is one of those things where we don't necessarily look at the bottom lane of V3 as this big carry lane, especially this season. They struggled a lot earlier on, and now, as long as they just do their jobs, they should be in a pretty decent spot to allow their top half of the map to contest DFM.
So that's our eyes on that one. And speaking, I suppose, at this point, Counterfeit, let's move on a little bit, ladies and gents, to some win conditions. What will it take for Detonation FocusMe to come away the victors in this series, come away with the Spring Split Championship? I'll leave you the obvious one here, because these guys are probably coming in somewhat favoured.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to look into the numbers to try and carve out some kind of truth here. I mean, some of the things I've been looking for here is that, how dominant DFM are in the early game. I mean, out of the 10 games they played between the playoffs and the regular season that have lasted less than 30 minutes, they've won 9 out of them. They've got an incredible win record at the best of times. I think as a sort of a broad idea here, V3 with a couple of minutes on average longer game time and generally a better chance with longer games. I think that's kind of the sort of thing they'll be trying to veer towards V3 if they're going to stand a chance here in the finals.
Okay, so Snowball, strong stuff. I asked Counterfeit, what do the numbers mean? He gave us the answer. Joshi, V3 though, what are you kind of thinking of their ways to win out on this series?
Well, okay, so the obvious one that we got to address is that DFM can beat themselves. Sometimes V3 just have to not beat themselves and let DFM make the mistake. So that's, win condition number 1. It's the only way DFM have lost so far this year. But if they're going to try and play for their own wins, they got to be playing through the top half of the map. They got to be playing through top, mid, and jungle. They can win these 2v2s. Ace can support Mujin. Mujin can support Cog. If they can find these winning matchups, they can give Cog something good into Effie, especially if they take red side and find counter picks, they will actually be able to win some of these matchups. They can find something against the Gnar. If Cog is willing to bring out the Jace that he had success with a couple seasons ago, this is something that they can actually win. The question is, will they be able to actually do that? Because it is going to be something that you're going to have to be trading back and forth. It's not easy to say, oh, we just beat Evie.
Yeah, like,
right.
It's simple. We beat the Ebby. Like, Maple, do you want to weigh in here as well? Bring us some of your former coach wisdom.
Well, I feel like Evie very often just blind picks his top laner. Like, he doesn't mind almost any matchup, and he's a player that really has a good standardized foundation where he'll never like feed out of control, and he's always ready to enter team fights very effectively. I almost feel like I would like to see them challenge Kazu a lot if V3 wants to win. I think Rhino has the champions that can punish Kazu really hard in lane. He's got things like the Thresh and the Nautilus, and if they play that 2v2 very aggressively, and maybe they get a bit of jungle support, or jungle help, then I think they can break open a big enough lead in the early game where it transitions to team fights by having like a really fed Jinx or a really fed Samira, whichever champion Hollow wants to play.
So a bit of a dissenting viewpoint there. Joshi's suggesting, well, play through the strength of your top 2v2. I think that's a very valid call. Whereas Maple saying, well, yeah, but there is a world here where Rhino on things like Israel. Please don't give Rhino Rel. Just stop it, guys. It's not a good idea. Like it's not been a good idea all split long. There is a world where, Kazu in particular, as we kind of mentioned earlier, has a habit, in particular in the laning phase, of just going too far.
Dying.
Yeah, thank you for putting a nice underline on that one. Yeah,
well,
dying.
To some degree, I think they don't mind giving Rel if they get Alistar, because that's what Kazu did maybe like 8 or 9 games this split. It's just like, here's Rel, the highest priority champion in the game, and we'll just take Alistar, because it counters it well, and it won't like feed out of control in lane.
He says that, and then we've also seen one or two where when DFM have had some bad times, often it's been Kazu leading the unfortunate charge of the Light Brigade. At which point, it is time, I think, guys, to start talking a little bit more around our predictions. We've kind of talked around a fair amount of these teams. We've given ourselves some narratives. We've talked some players. But before I do, Counterfeit, you're telling me in chat you got something you want to add in here.
I just wanted to just before we get into the predictions, just talk a little bit about the numbers on the DFM losses, as few as they are in terms of kills. We're mentioning the Kazu feeding and things. I think overall, and this is going to come up more in the predictions in a second, the games that DFM have lost have been the games they haven't managed to rack up a lot of kills, just generally. So I feel like if if games can, even in longer games, when they've lost, they've still been shut out of the game more or less entirely in terms of getting their snowballs rolling. So I think that's going to be very, very important for this series.
Okay, we'll keep our eyes on that. Good little metric to keep your eyes on, especially if DFM aren't getting things done early. Without that, we are now a little bit shorter on time. The hour has dinged, and I'm sure we'll be getting onto the rift and to the casters relatively soon, which means I'm going to start running along this line to get some predictions. Counterfeit, first up, who are you expecting to win this series? And I'm seeing a little smirk there, which tells me you might have something interesting for us.
Well, I never want to base my predictions on reality, but I did come up with an interesting correlation here. V3 stands for, and I'm not sure if this is the case, but I'm going to say that it is 3 victories. And that's why they're going to go 3-2 in this best of 5.
There we go. Someone's brought out the V3 prediction. We love it. Maple Street, perhaps bring us back with a little bit more analytical logic to this one.
I'm going to do the opposite. So, DFM kind of sounds like TSM, and TSM's my favorite team. So, you
like
got to
with a
think that
list.
DFM's going to win. I don't see DFM dropping more than 1 game. They're going to win.
There you have it. Joshi, step in.
I think, we got to get some people who got good predictions on this. DFM have only beaten themselves this season, guys. They're the only team that can do it. We got to stick with it. We got to see what's been going on. DFM should win this 3-0, 3-1. I think it's a little bit more likely 3-1 because I think they're likely going to beat themselves at least one time. They're going to get like game 1, game 2, like, oh, these guys are easy. And be like, oh my god, we have to take this series seriously? Okay, all right, we're going to turn it back on. Should be smooth sailing.
Whereas I'm going to go for the absolute bold call. Say I think DFM 3-0 this series. I'm going to put that one out there. That's my hot take for this one.
You just want to get more sleep, I bet.
Can you not?
Take a nap.
I've got half a liter of coffee next to me. It's going to keep me functioning throughout the day. And with that, ladies and gents, thank you so much, Counterfeit, Maple Street. Joshi will be throwing back to you after game 1. But until then, I am going to switch hats and become a play-by-play caster. And I'll be having Nymera come and sit down next to me and join me for the cast. See you in a bit, gents. Thanks again for all the analysis. And in the smoothest transition you've seen in your lives, look.
I'm here. I'm ready for Analyst Desk. I've got some really good points about how DFM only beat themselves, and I think there's going to be a really good series.
I've got knockoff Joshi next to me to come and help cast. I am, of course, back here and ready to be doing some casting with my brother, otherwise known as Alexander Nymera Hapgood, who's a little too eager to be on an Analyst Desk. But unfortunately, he's just going to be our color caster for the day. Good to have you, buddy. I know you've been listening in. Any extra thoughts you want to bring into the series?
I think there are some really good points made by absolutely everyone. There is too much for me to jump in and say, I agree, I disagree, I agree. I think that there's been a lot of good points about champion pools in terms of, Arya plays Assassins, has a bigger champion pool. What's going to happen with... the LJL has only played Assassins if it's in the name of LeBlanc, and that's not really happened this year. I mean, obviously Ace played that in the very last series. there have been, I don't know, Ebby being one of the other Akali players. It feels like all of the Akali nature of the LJL has somehow wound its way
Coalesced,
onto DFM. And I thought that was a really interesting point which Joshi brought up. Obviously, some really cool historical points brought up by everyone too.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was enjoying the point that Maple was bringing up as well, saying, like, yeah, just that one time we beat DFM, it was, or not DFM, beat Aria, it was just this guy picking talent randomly.
Yeah, obviously was not talented enough.
This is why we didn't have him on the analyst desk, guys. We had enough puns between poor old Canavet and Maple Street and DFM, TSM. Like, I don't need it, you know? This is supposed to be a serious moment in the finals, but humor aside, I'm genuinely quite excited for the series. I think, hopefully, my head is saying I suspect this will be potentially a bit of a wash for DFM, but my heart is hoping that V3 continue on their incredible run of form. They've taken a lot of these series. It was a lot of 5-game series. They took Rascal Jesters a little bit more easily, I think, perhaps fair to say. But versus DFM, it's another kind of order of difficulty. But I'm really hoping they come here to contest. I'm hoping, potentially, we get ourselves a bit of a fight in this series.
No, and there's a lot to be said about, what's going to happen if V3 come in with a really strong red side leaning. We saw that versus Rascal Jester. We know that before that series, blue side in the LJL playoffs has had something like a 70% win rate.
Pretty nuts.
Really strong, particularly with stuff like the Hecarim first pick being very viable and very successful. Until you're playing against, the Gnar being locked in so early, not having a suitable counter, and then the Hecarim not being a jungler which can bail out your top side of the map. If we're seeing V3 having found like their method of success, particularly on that red side, I think that DFM could find themselves a bit awkward in terms of how they prep for this series. In fact, we talked about at the end of the broadcast yesterday, thinking actually, you've only got a day to prep for what's happening now with V3's, switch in priorities inside of the Rift and champions that they're going towards early on. Is this going to be a problem?
I guess that's the question. Like, is it a surprise to see people like Cog return to the Gnar? And I'm not entirely sure. Is it only because you've been playing against it most of the season? But you are right. It's always interesting because when it's a particular team who's done it, and they'll have their own inflections and take on particular picks. And Cog plays a mean Gnar. Like, there are Gnars, and then there are people like Ebby and Cog's Gnar. Like that. It's a very different experience. And then we've also people like Mugen. It's like, yeah, Udyr for this guy is pretty good. Turns out he's quite strong on that champion. Olaf, got to keep your eyes on, even if Steel plays it as well. It's like a rising priority.
Yeah, I mean,
questions to be answered.
No, when I go out just to go to the shops, I stay away from walls just in case Cog is nearby. Yeah, his Gnar just flings everything into them, much to the displeasure of enemy teams in Baron pits. But yeah, I think there is a real question now of what are the picks you can afford to let V3 have? What are the big picks you can let them have? Of course, they played a lot around Jinx Gnar first round on red side, and then they would just say, okay, well, Gnar at that point can play strong or weak side, and it turned out Cog was just winning out in the matchups in top side anyway, and they could wrangle these compositions in a way which is really happy for them to play not just the late game, but have the early game priority in the top side too, which allowed Mugen so much of a platform to play off in the early game. So if, again, I think that's going to be really interesting because V3, when they have had a winning matchup in the jungle, has often meant they win in mid lane too. And Ace, with his supportive styles, which Maple Street was talking about a lot too, can get unlocked, can go across the map. And for me, particularly, V3, if they do get themselves a winning mid jungle 2v2, can then start, bailing out the rest of the lanes, which might be, in terms of player for player, a bit outmatched.
We kind of said, well, we had Maple say, well, maybe the bot lane's where you focus. Joshi saying, well, top lane, Cog also where you focus. But a lot of that comes
mid-jungle.
Exactly, but a lot of what we're saying is effectively there is a starting point which says mid and jungle get to go somewhere that is not mid and jungle and move to one of the side lanes to make those lanes a little bit more unmatched, I guess. Try and find that sort of, what's the word? Man advantage. There we go. It's probably the way of phrasing it, I think.
The overlap.
The overlap.
Using the rugby terminology. I hear that's okay in Japan too right now.
And we do love watching the Brave Blossoms play when you get the chance. And maybe that's an option as well. If you can get Ace and Mugen unlocked on the map with advantages, and there's a counter effect which you're mentioning as well, like, if you can kind of hold DFM accountable in the early game, make sure they're not getting kills and plays off, if they do get a little bit stalled out, sometimes that is the way you can take something away from DFM if they haven't done it themselves by playing a little bit cockily in the draft. I remember a blue 4-5 Akali Lucian solo lane draft, which raised everybody's eyebrows pretty much everywhere.
Yes, Salt, thy name is DFM Sengoku second round Robin. We were waiting for DFM to come out with this record win streak, maybe try and top that, that 12-2 first place scoreline that the first place teams had in both spring and summer of 2020. And then that draft came out and I thought, oh man, Sengoku have been really face up with what they've picked. They picked a Hecarim and a Callista. You know that they're going to be diving in, and then they picked two very short-range champions, which played exactly into what they wanted to do. And they said, you know what, we'll just lane diff. Spoilers, they didn't lane diff enough, and that was kind of the story of that game. So yes, I think that, and also Joshi wrote an article about the loss to Rascal Jets in the regular season too, and it does genuinely seem that even though we haven't, necessarily been talking to the entirety of the split, when we came together to prep for these finals, everyone was just saying, okay, yeah, well, DFM, they tend to lose it more than the other team wins it if they do end up on the other side of the victory score.
Absolutely, and I think there's something to that. Of course, V3 will be hoping to change that narrative. I mentioned it on the desk. It was obviously a little bit of a kind of like broader narrative point, something that's bring a bit of hype, but there's some truth to it too. V3 would love to change that narrative and say, actually, the growth we've had to come to the finals, to compete and challenge to reclaim the title, right? They are actually the reigning champions, even if it is a bit of a whole new roster, even if it is a whole new season.
That
they
DFM, they've got to reclaim it.
Exactly, yeah. DFM are the ones here in some ways that are trying to reclaim it, even if they are the ones that have been waiting in the finals for V3 to come and fight them for it. And they would love to say, actually, we are worthy of being here, we are worthy of contention, and we are ready and willing to prove that we can beat you, not just have you beat yourselves.
Yeah, no, anyone can hold the shield, but you got to be worthy of wielding Mjolnir, and one of these two teams will have it at the end of the day. And as we were saying again, MSI has now been announced, and the LJL has for so long now been in a place where we haven't really shown anything internationally. We've never made it to a group stage, never made it out of a plans, as long as plans has
been a thing. It's been a while.
Going into summer, knowing that DFM is about to place, the left arm of the Forbidden One, put Gang back into the roster come summer, having this experience which they could get from winning this split is arguably more important than actually winning Spring Split in itself. It's playing up against players like Showmaker and of course players, even the likes of Perks or even Jensen, coming into the international tournament. There's so much experience to be gained for the winning team that comes out here if V3 go. So, maybe they can, again, show that they were deserving of international competition in 2020, even though Plains was such a disaster for them. Then again, DFM had such a disastrous split appearance themselves at 2019 Worlds. Both of these teams trying to shake off those demons, and this is the time to do it.
Absolutely. I think that's a fair way of putting it, really. I'd think about some way to put it better, but I think you've done it for me, so thank you for that. Makes my life a lot easier, I tell you. I suppose at this point as well, it is worth sort of saying that, whoever does win here, as we said, is going to MSI, and hopefully whoever wins it will be a worthy representative. We're not necessarily expecting people to be getting out of groups, especially with an LCS first seed and an LCK first seed in that group, along with, I believe, the LLA first seed. That's a stacked group to begin with. You're going against the literal reigning world champions in damn one here, who will be there, who look as imperious as they have done for a whole damn year, it feels like.
A bit of tragedy did strike. There was the chance that we'd have LJL versus Boogie, who is in the LLA. Sadly did not make it through, so condolences to that player, but to the winning team, of course. We'll see you very, very soon, and be on your guard.
Exactly, and of course there may well be someone like the likes of Perks and Blabber, or Jensen, Santorin, Alfari coming in to fight off against Ebby and Khan. Like, there should be some incredible matchups,
I'm just saying, Ebby solo killed Vizicachi.
It happened.
He's done some okay things internationally.
It happened, absolutely. And that really will be the question, of course. Just waiting to get into picks and bans here, guys. We are at the whims of the LJL production, so once we're in, we'll be in as soon as we can.
You mean we're not the main show?
Oh, we are, but we've got. But I
was worried,
But like a lot of what our content is around, the underlying stuff is around this whole League of Legends business.
Right, gotcha.
About there. And we'll have to wait and see exactly how, of course, everything plays out in game. We've set up a lot of our narratives, our storylines. We had a whole analyst desk with analysts from around the world, very different time zones, I tell you. We've had very late nights for a couple of our American friends and very early mornings for our UK friends. It's a pleasure to be able to get everybody together on one screen, on one team. But it's really now just left for the actual play to get things off.
we go. I mean, I suppose the one thing we can talk about is what I predicted for the series.
Oh, yeah, of
because
course.
obviously you guys all went through it, and Counterfeit was struck by a bout of insanity. It seems maybe he was the drunk in this game of Blood on the Clock Tower. But I mean, I do actually think this could go a lot closer than people are giving it credit for. Why is that? Again, maybe I've been struck by the same bout of insanity, but just the fact that V3 have come up with such an unorthodox way to draft in the current patch, and they've shown their ability to adapt towards enemy teams' strengths. It has been such an important thing to see how teams have tried to adapt against them. Rascal Jesters failed to do that. Sengoku failed to do that. V3 have now beaten the third place regular place team, the second placed regular season team, and this was a team that only had one win combined against all top 3 teams in the regular season. They're now angling for the head of DFM, and they've worked their way up the table. If DFM cannot roll with the punches, and they do, as we've kind of characterized them to be, get a bit arrogant, there is a chance that V3 really slap them in a couple of games. I do think DFM will win. I think it's going to be a 3-2, and we're not going to get any sleep anytime soon.
Well, that's the call from Nymera. He is definitely feeling a little bit of that Haikyuu-esque storyline. The anime redemption arc is here. It's a mirror of summer. We've said DFM had to climb their way up through the gauntlet to find a 5-game series against V3, which they lost in summer. So all roles inverted this time in spring. DFM were the ones waiting in the finals. V3 had to climb their way through the gauntlet, but V3 will be really wanting to retain the scoreline, or at least the 3-game wins they got. As Counterfeit was saying, they got the 3 in the name. It's all but foretold.
But I mean, the hilarious thing is, again, we were saying that coming into V3 Sengoku, we had one prediction combined across official LJL stream, unofficial casters in ourselves, and then Lexi, and of course we really do wish him a swift recovery. And then our entirety of our Discord, which you should totally join, because we do have predictions there, and you can hear us, just talk random crap about the LJL and ourselves. There was one person who predicted V3 that win, and that was the Pope of PP God's Church from the LPL, who is on a team called V5. And ever since then, the V5 to V3 buff has been absurd. And thank you for breaking our league. Hopefully, we will see a return to normalcy. But I'm hoping for a really good series in this finals.
Just going to double check. No tinfoil in there, but the conspiracy theories continue unabated. More reasons why we've kept him off the analyst desk this time, I tell you, ladies and gents. He's a little bit too unhinged. Just unhinged enough to be casting this game alongside me, however. So, again, everything on stage.
I'm just like
just
in my
waiting
own
to get in.
containment chamber called the caster desk.
I mean, I'd love to offer something more to that, but that's exactly what he's getting. Kind of looking over a little bit as well. There's some little things to keep our eyes on. DFM currently up at the most kills and assists of any team at 15 on average in the league. Most goal difference at 15, about 1,366. They got they've done some great Rift Herald stuff. 1.4 Rift Heralds a game, good stuff for them. But it's not like V3 are all that far behind in playoffs either.
But so I want to shout back to something that Counterfeit was saying on the desk in terms of, okay, well, DFM, when they've lost, have been shut out in terms of kills. They've just not managed to brawl effectively enough, and that is against a team that has the highest kills and assists at 15. You can see the stark difference in how differently DFM's games go when they have lost very occasionally towards their average, and their average has been, as you're saying, so damn good. They are first or second in all of the major stats in the early game in terms of their goal difference, first tower, and
Heralds,
Dragons.
all of it. Yeah.
Basically all metrics that people give a damn about. Now, part of that is because they are just very good laners, and that's something that we said coming into this, and yeah, I mean, Joshi was calling about something which I said at the end of play-ins. I was obviously very sad by what V3 had unfortunately fallen to in that play-in stage, but it just seemed that it's the statement that you say so often. You must be this tall to ride the international roller coaster. There just is a bar of mechanical ability that you need to surpass, and DFM with Aria, I said at the end of play-ins, is maybe the only roster the LJL could field, particularly when Gang gets residency, that has the raw laning ability and the team fighting potential to take it to, I don't know, if not the major regions, maybe the VCS, PCS representatives. Obviously they're very strong in their own right. That's obviously a very inflammatory statement right there, but if it is going to happen, I think it had to be that roster. We still don't have, as we said, the left arm of the Forbidden One locked in Gang, because he needs to wait until summer for that to happen. but that's really what we're waiting for.
Absolutely. A little bit of Band-Aider up on screen as well at this point. Some interesting ones to call out. Joshi did mention the Hecarim hole in Mujin's champion pool. I think it possibly holds
That's why
true.
they got the red sign priority, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why you see so many of those power picks banned away so often, right? You know, like it's not just, you know, DFM spreading things across. They're happy every so often to let the Gnar through, to let the Seraphine through. V3 have been banning Seraphine on blue side and on red side, you know. I think that V3, their priority on a lot of these picks has been notably different from the other playoff teams.
I think that's completely true. I mean, a little bit more varied from DFM. You see those sort of blue side bans there a little bit. Again, Seraphine on there, not really a surprise. You don't want to give that champion over. Senna as well has been pretty strong. There's no super odd ones in there. It's a little bit more varied, as we said, for V3. The Orianna focus, for example, is an interesting one. I know Ace obviously has put some time in to try and learn that champion, as it's not necessarily been a champion he's always been comfortable on.
Not before this year, honestly. He played one... In fact, Ace's first ever Orianna game came in a loss in the last finals versus DFM. He had never picked it before. I think it was it might have been game 3, where DFM ended up going 2-1 up in that series. And then game 4 and 5, he went back to his Zoe and had a really strong performance versus Seros, actually. So for him to come back into the split, have that Orianna, and make it work is very important for the side of V3. However, on the other side of it, actually, Arya had not played that pick very much himself before coming to the split, because he had been, well, maybe reaching a bit too far and too deep into those pockets, which, you know, Maple Syrup and Doshi were both talking about themselves and saying, yeah, maybe don't pick the Talon, maybe go towards something that's just a little bit more, you know, usual. But going back towards the Orianna, this is one of the really big things for me in terms of DFM, what Arya has given to the team. He says, alright, okay, I don't need to be on the pop-off assassin right now. I'm going to allow you to pick up the control mages for this draft, because you deserve it at this point. It's kind of like the old Forgiven in the Callista problem back in Season 5 and 6, when he was such a big player in the LEC. Well, I mean, Europe. Before the time of the LEC, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, there's some truth to that as well. And, like, again, it will be a very different thing getting onto the Rift, seeing how it all plays out in game. It's never the same. Plans not... surviving contact with the enemy and all of that, received wisdom, but I suppose as well this is kind of the split where DFM finally did make some changes. We kind of mentioned, you know, it is Seros stepping away from the mid lane role as the starting mid laner for this team, who's been here so long.
We were so worried about that. What's going to happen with the team dynamic without these two core players involved?
Oh, exactly, and of course Gang will be coming back, so that'll be at least some of that roster coming back together again, but that has to wait until summer, and until then they've got to play with the roster they have here. There is a world, of course, where if things go wrong, Seros and Gang step in for Arya and Kazu, but you heard Maple on the desk, you heard Counterfeit as well. It's like, there is a world, but it's a world where things have started going quite wrong for DFM.
Yeah, I think if you need to take red side away from V3, you kind of need Arya, because this is what CGA did in the entirety of 2020, particularly in summer, and this was when we referred to CGA as the coin flip team, but suddenly it became the weighted coin flip team because they were doing so well, and, you know, they had such a strong summer split when DFM had fallen off. You just wait until Red 5, and that infinite champion ocean that Arya has, you wait until that point, you say, is there a pick you have right now that can just win you the game? And more often than not, the answer was yes. Occasionally, you know, he'd pick Aurelia into Galio and a couple of other really good chip picks at CCing the Aurelia as they dive into the team fight and lose. But they just having that champion pool on the red side going into the counter picks with both solo laners having such large champion pools means that if V3 had been over-reliant on red side, maybe that's a way DFM could slap back and adapt themselves if the blue side priority isn't working out so well for them.
That's exactly that. We've got those options. We've got some flexibility. Both of these teams, honestly, have had some odd picks which they can pull out. We mentioned, of course, the Tristana over for Cog, of course. So, you know, the guy plays Tristana top. That's not necessarily what you're expecting. You know, that option to pull out some crazy stuff, especially here in a finals when any cards you have left need to be. That would be an interesting one. Those blight stacks getting up as fast as you can.
Doinby Varus hack, 3,000 damage in one ability.
I mean, I definitely saw a clip relatively recently of a sort of full build AP Varus deleting a full tank HP or HP stacking Cho'Gath. Like, there is a world where you can really blow people up. Just sort of going back over on the stream as well, you can see not an AP Varus, worth pointing out, but a DFM taking down Rascal Jesters in their series only a week or so ago. Actually, was it a week? It would have been a week or so ago. I'm trying to remember quickly about when this game. Trying to remember all the various dates, and it was honestly relatively convincing in that game 4. Sol picks up that Ezreal. It's all a bait. They have the strats to come and deal with it, and Steel certainly could play the Hecarim, even if Mugen is a little more leery about the champion.
And, you know, this is one of those games where, you know, Kanatu did have to go back to the Aatrox, and then Ebby is just really happy to just be on that Gragas. It's a flex pick. Kazu can play the pick too. It's another one of those tanky engage-ish supports. But again, just having the ability to have one of these solo laners be on a power pick and save the counter pick for later into the draft because of their such large champion pools has been such a boon for DFM, particularly when you have support and jungle who might not be picking up so many different champions right now, be able to pick up the meta power picks, and there are so many of them for those roles.
That's exactly it, isn't it? We don't necessarily know how everything plays out in the long term, like with all of this stuff, but it is a challenge in some ways to be kind of keeping our eyes on all of these varying picks, what the actual meta will be in game, in series. We've got our own ideas. We've mentioned things like the Nart. We've kind of worried a little bit about the Hecarim. We mentioned, say, the Rel from Reiner, but Kazu's got his own eyes on the Alistair. Lots to see and think about, yeah.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to talk about series meta, where you have team metas, global metas, but then you also have what's happening on the day. What do you have to say, even if your preppers has been so robust? If it doesn't work out, you have to sit there and say, all right, back to the drawing board. That's what V3 did versus the Hawks in their round 1 match. They did have some Gnar counters cooked up in the likes of the Urgot, the Tristana top, and neither of them worked. So that's when they said, okay, right, not giving up Gnar at this point. We're just going to pick it away. We're not going to rely on something which just isn't working on stage. And I'm glad that V3 didn't fall prey to, you know, just hubris and just saying, oh, we'll just run it back. And that's kind of what we saw from Sengoku and Rascal Jester. The question is DFM going to fall to the same weakness, or will they just, again, much like Rascal Jester did in their last couple of games of yesterday, and there were sparingly few of them because it was a 3-0, and just run it back and make, you know, some minor changes without really finding out the source of their problems.
Yeah, and, you know, credit as Gren, I think, probably has to be given, obviously, up to Cog and Mugen, as we've mentioned before, but also things like, actually, Reiner and Hollow stepping up in playoffs when it kind of matters. That Maple kind of mentioned there were some moments where things got a little bit dicey for them, but they had a great couple series against some very impressive bot laners. I'm talking Sol, I'm talking Gango and the likes. Very good. However, some of the players we probably ought to be mentioning a little bit here. Arya and Ace.
Yeah, go on. Go blind pick Zoe into Arya, see what happens.
And there's our win-loss record against each other. Some fairly impressive DPM stats for, of course, the playoffs, but Arya still edging it out about 47, nearly 48 DPM more, which is pretty damn good going. And the CSD as well, kind of showing in there. That's probably because Ace does love to roam. He's not necessarily known for his laning per se, as his ability to impact the map.
Although I have to say, you know, as someone who was on the Ace criticism train for a lot of 2020, I was also like, dude, you can't just give up this much farm and this much pressure. He's had a really good spring split in terms of his laning ability, in terms of his ability to stay even and keep himself relevant. And once he's out of that laning phase, in fact, one of the things which I remember talking to Maple about earlier in the split, just across Twitter and all this other stuff, is that Ace, for all his shortcomings in lane, has such good instincts around skirmishes and team fights. Having something like the Zoe, which is able to make things up on the fly, use the terrain, and other things to their advantage, is really important for both of these teams. Again, they're flicking over to the Orianna, both of these players picking that pickup specifically for this split. We've talked about both these players in terms of how they've gone towards this pick kind of and just said, oh, right, we'll trust our teams to actually play around this control mage now. You can see how good both of them have been. Yes, Ace did lose on it, didn't look great on it in the last finals, but this split has been a very different beast.
I think that's completely fair. Again, just waiting to get into picks and bans here.
Yeah, you've been talking about this matchup for a solid hour now.
I know, I have. I'm genuinely have. But
we still have material.
Mate, I've got pages to go through. It's great. I mean, invisible pages. My pages are all digital at the minute. But okay, moving on. Where was I going to go? I was going to go with that, and then I went for the joke, which was possibly a mistake.
Well, no, it's obviously, again, like we're saying, wait until we get into pick and ban, and it's really going to be interesting, again, to see, of course, DFM, what are they... I would imagine they are going to pick blue side and just say, all right, well, V3, you're so good on red side, show it to us. And maybe they can start adapting as things go on. The dangerous thing is, if this series comes down to side selection, which... Again, there's a lot of different moving parts. If you lose that first game, and then particularly because V3 will have side choice the game after at that point, things can get really dicey really quickly. Because then you know you kind of waited against the other team where you lost a game on your own side selection, and then they have two of their own to close out the series if it comes to it later on to the series. So that's one thing, again, I've hit on it a lot this pre-game so far, that we have to watch out for.
Exactly. I mean, like, Muujin and Cog have the tools, right, to pick up some champions and start a snowball that catches people off guard, and if you can do that once or twice, then you cause some difficulties. We might actually be heading towards picks and bans in a few moments. Thank you for bearing with us. It's been quite the show thus far. We've had a hell of a crew of people. Again, I do want to offer a massive thanks from us over here on the LJL OU to the likes of Counterfeit, to Joshi for Maple Street, of course, Patrick for producing. Love a lot of you for coming in and helping. It's great to have some people.
And to everyone else that supported us throughout the split too. For everyone that's tuning in today for the first time, great to have you here. For everyone else that's worked with us, you know, we've got Milky Cereal, Greyheart, Kashka, a number of others which have come in on short notice, and Reed of one of the other people that are producers for us. We've been so blessed to have so much talent on our end of things, and we are so blessed to see so much talent on that edge of the screen too, because we are about to see them head onto the rift. It looks like we are, again, edging close towards that champion select.
Absolutely. And again, it's just waiting in. It's a big pre-game over in Japan official. They're a few hours ahead of us all and having a much nicer time of it than we were getting up at some very... I know. Man, breakfast would have been great. I would have loved breakfast at this point.
Well, let's see who eats for breakfast in this early game, because I just kind of bring it back to...
hanging fruit, or at least cereal.
Well, like we said, I mean, Cog, I mean, I'm lovingly referring to him to as not just Captain Crunch, but Captain Hop, Crunch Wallop Nah. So he's bringing all of the nutritional needs from that top lane if he does get that pick.
Yeah, a solo kill a day keeps the jungler away.
I don't
think it does. No, I think it might attract them.
It actually goes the other way, because suddenly like, oh, there's a shutdown there. Me like you that.
Shutdown goal. We like that one. Yeah, exactly. Sadly, we're not really in a meta of things like... Good lord, ladies and gentlemen. I think it is fair to say I don't need to joke anymore, because we have ourselves pick and bans with a fresh new painted coat of paint as well. DetonatioN FocusMe will be on the blue side. V3 Esports will be on the red. And of course, Ebby, Steel, Aria, Utapon, and Kazu will be making up the DFM roster for this first game.
The contenders to the title, holding it already from the Summit 2020 split, are V3 Esports in the top lane. It's Cog, Muujin in the jungle, Ace in the mid lane, and Hollow and Reiner in that bot lane.
We've got a few bans have come through here in this first game. The first picks and bans: Galio, Rel, Seraphine, all away from V3, all high priority for the members of V3's playmaking core. On the other side, double junglers Hecarim and Udyr, plus the Renekton away from Ebby.
Exactly. So I think that the ban of Hecarim on red side, very telling that V3...
Wait for it.
Do not trust...
Oh, the Ebby thumbs up.
Do not trust DFM to not have something more stable in that top side and just win out passively with the Gnar matchup into the enemy top laner. So V3 not going to get themselves that Gnar matchup. They'll have to go back to the drawing board. Remember, they had prepped some Gnar counters for earlier rounds of plus. It just didn't work out. Having the Senna, though, on bot side allows them to maybe to pick something which requires a bit more attention, a few more resources on that top side, because they're picking the ultra-safe Senna Tahm Kench on the bot side.
We had a couple different win conditions. Either get that top lane rolling, or play through your bot lane. With the Senna Tahm Kench, it's looking like it'll be the top lane option. It's a safe bot lane. It's an option to throw a Dawning Shadow up towards the top lane to help out over there. DFM will have knowledge of that and will look to try and find their own ways to deal with it. Nocturne, the lock in here. There's a world where, of course, it potentially ends up something like mid,
but more
like
available now
absolutely.
too, as well. I'm just saying, like, there are a lot of flexible. Well, you can flex things around still a bit. Nocturne mid hasn't really been a thing since his base magic resist was hit just a little too much. He prefers the long lane. The reason he's in top lane is because Nara's so prominent and he can start winning out that matchup. DFM going for the pylon composition now with the Kai'Sa following through. Some really interesting things from a guy called Coach Nelson on Twitter, who's of course been around the pro scene for a little while. He said a bit of his cheat sheet is that if you have something like Karma, you just win team fights if the enemy doesn't have a similar enchanter support. If you have Nocturne, you tend to win out front-to-back team fights if you have consistent damage kind of equalized between your 280 carries. So it's going to be very important for me, now they've locked in that Nocturne, to have Utapon get ahead, be relevant on this Kai'Sa, because the Senna, the later you go into the game, will just be doing more damage in a front-to-back setting.
Exactly, but you do have the dive and the burst here from DFM. Utapon pulled out the Kai'Sa in their game 4 versus Rascal. Just had a great time on it. Not Hollow, Muujin, I apologize, going to be going towards the Graves as well.
Okay.
It wasn't the best look in their first game loss to Sengoku Gaming.
No, it was not.
Gets caught out by the mid jungle for first blood, so have to be doing a little bit better than that. But of course, Muujin likes to be the carnivore where he can help it. Likes to be the guy who's on the carry. But as kind of Maple was saying, it's not necessarily been the cleanest option for him. He's preferred him on things a little bit more CC heavy, and that's not CC heavy.
No, it's not. So then the question is, okay, where is your CC going to come from? Because you're looking at a Senna Last Embrace that they'll be coming through, and that's
Tongue
it
Lash,
right now.
yeah.
Your Tongue Lash, that barely counts. I mean, at that point, you should may as well just count the smoke screen as the same thing. DFM, banning out mid laners, which they think are maybe better in that blind pick, better at exerting pressure. One of the things about LeBlanc is that she does end up having that CC for a very strong 2v2 mid, and one of the good things, Everfrost as well as an option. For me, this is important to tell, actually DFM not being arrogant about how they are approaching this 2v2, not saying, oh, we'll just have Arya beat out Ace in the 1v1. They are respecting his champion pool. Speaking of his champion pool, his most played champion right now is that LeBlanc, and his Jace was that second. He does play a lot of Karma, that's locked in, and it is a flex pick between the two solo lanes.
So Karma now locked in. They've got another little while before they have to lock in a final option. Karma, as we said, could go top, could go mid. I wonder, with how they've been playing this split, whether they do look to give Cog that final option. Now DFM got to lock in their last 2 picks, and it's a very rapid lock-in of a Rise for Arya and a set for, of course, dear old Kaz with the bot lane.
That it is. So, this will be Arya's 5th Rise game. We haven't seen it this split from my knowledge. You know that matchup now, though. You know he is shorter range, so if you're looking at something which can corral him into different areas, funnel him into different parts of the map, then maybe you can look to put down a Gravity Field, put down the Chaos Storm, and have the Victor for Ace come out.
Victor in for Ace was not what I would have necessarily picked as his choice here for champion. We got teased with a Jace, didn't come through. That'll put the Karma towards the top lane. It'll leave Victor versus Rise in the mid lane, and at least to my mind, I'm not sure you want to buy into a Control Mage versus Control Mage matchup if you're versus the likes of Arya. That sounds kind of risky.
Just to throw it out there, this will be Ace's first ever Victor game. He has never played that champion before.
Okay.
It has been in the pro meta since Season 5, dipping in and out. So it has been one of these picks which is kind of the accepted way of things, has been known for quite a while. Have to see how V3 play around it, though. This is a composition with a solo tank in that Tahm Kench. You do have the Karma backing things up, but that Tahm Kench isn't particularly tanky versus the high shred of the Rise and the Kai'Sa. Both of them, if they manage to pinion place that Rune Prison, can burst out that Tahm Kench quickly. And also when you're looking at the different ways to reach the backline, with creative Realm Warps, with creative use of that Nocturne ultimate, that should be something which DFM can use to win these straight up 5v5s.
Exactly, and they've got some 1-3-1 options here as well. Rise and Gnar definitely got ways to play these side lanes up. And our analysts over on their little side chat are despairing over lack of CC here for V3.
I agree.
They were a little less kind. A few more expletives thrown in there. Rightly so, it's a bit of an odd one. There is a lack of CC for V3.
Well, put it this way: if Arya gets his phase rush off, how do you kill him? You don't. He just runs out of the fight. He gets his, he EWQs. He runs away with his passive move speed, with the phase rush move speed, and you don't really get to choose what he does after that point. Very important, because that means that Rise has options to get out of a fight, turn into the fight too, and chase down. I think that Arya in particular particularly because he is one of those big players in the LJL, one of the top players in our region. He has that carry potential to really set things off to a good start for DFM.
He really, really does. And we saw the match of the day flash across the official stream.
There is only one match
but there is
today.
only one match. He will always be the match of the day. You're all tuned in for it. DFM versus V3 Esports. We've called out a potential flaw in the V3 comp. It's fine if DFM kind of come to them, and in fairness, with a Nocturne, with a Kaiser, they will be coming to them to an extent. That will be option to put out your damage. The question is whether you can hold people down or engage on your own terms, because with the comp you have, not a huge amount of CC.
No. Whereas on the other side, you do have yourself the Fear Tether and the Rise. I was just thinking, oh yeah, what's happening with the semi-globals and whatever. But yes, you've got ample CC from the side of DFM. Why is that important? It means that that the Kaiser can follow up on, roaming bot into mid jungle 2v2s. And that can be very important, particularly when you are someone like that Graves who can be shut down by someone like the Nocturne if he does find the right angle and has support.
Both junglers starting on their top sides of the map, be pathing towards the bot lane, see whether what Nymero was saying plays out. Of course, we saw the level 1 ward shenanigans, what a surprise, versus V3.
Yeah, we saw this all the time in the last series. Just level 1, contest them over their level 1 vision.
And Kazu seems to be willing to do exactly that. Both early wards in the bush in bot lane contested and fought over. Both supports lost some health pots as a result, but not much more to be said right now. And Cog doing calmer things, namely Mantra queuing the wave and the champion at the same time.
So, we're talking about the lack of CC again and how it'd be important for the phase rush on Aria. It's also important for Set too, remember. If he gets that knuckle down, gets himself the phase rush after he does manage to get a little bit of damage down, in those combos, expect Kazu to be a lot more survivable than you expect from 2. In fact, he's not trying to make V3 less survivable.
Flash for the level 2. Last Embrace misses, but that's a summon down for Kazu. Didn't get that much out of the Flash face breaker.
No, that's a bit of a womp played on a kazoo.
No. How have we not been making these puns all the way through this play? Either way, continue, sir.
Because it reflects poorly on my casting ability. I'm sorry, my punning powers were used too much on other name puns, but we have got some powder left dry. Flash down, though, does mean that Mugen has a chance to maybe do something in the spot side. He's wrapping around. First play going to V3.
Definitely going to think about going for it. Mugen is here, looking to be available. Slight freeze frame on our end, but it's coming back now swiftly. Exhaust down, Kazu now in trouble. They had to have an idea this was happening, and Kazu just dying for first blood. Gets off a decent haymaker on the way, but it's not going to save his life. Hollow gets out with first blood, and that was an easy first blood, in all honesty.
What do you mean V3 played around the one piece of CC they have as a team to make things work? Kazu, far too over-aggressive on the final stage in this first game. Gets punished for it. First kill goes to V3. Not exactly what DFM want, particularly because we know that V3 do have a well-planned out early game, and DFM, if they do start falling behind in that regard, have floundered a bit in their losses.
Definitely been a flaw in some of their games. The Twitter vote, though, seems to fly in the face of that first blood. 89% of people who've been voting over on that particular poll giving DFM the advantage, and you can't really blame them. It's a very popular team who've been playing very well.
Yes, they are. So, Steel going to get himself a camp Steel down. Cog walking up, going to get down, just going to force Steel off of the remaining Krugs. So for the attempt on bot side, the opportunity cost was just a bit of camps, a few camps on that top side, or, well, I say few, just that one. So Mugen, quick, efficient pathing towards that bot side, hasn't really lost anything for it. Now it's on DFM, really, to start shielding themselves again.
Mugen's into the top lane, looking to see whether he can get something down, but Ebby, with a hop, bounces his way out to safety, has a Meganar on its way as well, and Mugen is just here to help his top laner shove out for an easy back.
And he is. So, Ace gonna get, again, phase rush. This is what happens. You put down the grab field and, you just get out traded. Victor not at the point right now where he can really put down the DPS in the same range that Rise is doing.
I'm smelling some fried electrics, overloaded, you might say, I suppose, which is, so apt, considering Arya is on the rise, stepping forward and looking to zone Ace away from this wave best he can.
If that Q had hit, I actually wonder if there's a combo where he actually gets a clean kill to Ace before that combo comes up with a flashy EW for the root in place. Either way, Ace getting a little bit out-traded there. Hasn't led to anything in that CS, though.
He's got a corrupting pot as well.
And he's still ended up... Well, you start with the corrupting pot, you back get that tier, you refill in the corrupting pot, and it kind of easy as he does it for the first couple of levels in that game. Ace doing okay in this mid lane so far.
All the while, Steel is just saying, I want level 6 as fast as I can. I am not touching my lanes. See you in 2 minutes or so. He's up to level 5 pretty early on. He's doing pretty well on the farm. And of course, that's what Mugen has traded for getting into lane a couple times. He's lost some CS as a result, and he will be a little bit slower to the level 6. But at the same time, it's potentially got his bot lane a little bit more even than he would have otherwise.
6, Meganar.
That's big deal. Meganar coming up. Never mind anything else. Big more into the wall as well. Conkog's trying to flash away, but I don't think he's got anything more. He needs a root. He needs a shield, but the ball toss gets Ebby a kill on the top side.
How many times in 2020 did we see Ebby get the level 6 to level 5 solo kill? It's one of the biggest power spikes in a solo lane. You get your ult first, and you all in with the correct timing. We've seen it so many times on the likes of Wukong, on the likes of Akali, but on the Gnar, pretty much his signature pick at this point. Ebby strikes back in that top lane, evening up the kill score.
He does, and he does it with style. We call out Ebby versus Kog'Kog being an important matchup. We've mentioned that Kog'Kog can be a little bit of a tilter, and this is a play that could start it all off. Level 6 comes through.
That it does. So, and the other thing is, of course, when you're using the hop on Gnar, you get a huge amount of attack speed nowadays. So he just turns around. Yeah, he's going to get rooted at some point, but, well, Kog'Kog, not quite Pog in this play, flashes away just a bit too late, was shunted into the wall, and turns out cool guys don't look at explosions nor at flying boulders, they'd rather just get the kill.
That's a bit of a rough one. Kog'Kog's going to be kicking himself for that one. It sucks. Steel still doing what Steel was always going to be doing, which is farming his way up to 6. He'll be there relatively shortly, and that keeps the gold a little bit more even. Still a slight lead to V3, but not much more as Kazu gets himself another big face breaker. Hollow taken desperately low. Curse the Black Mist, it means he doesn't fall, but that is down to about 100 HP and needs to probably back away.
And given that DFM lost a solo kill on top side, they are getting pushed in on bot side and getting out-traded, feels like Mugen can't really head to these neutral objectives. All while this is happening, Arya farming up a storm in that mid lane, resetting exactly when he wants to, gets perfect back for the boots, which again, move speed in this game for the lower range, fast-moving carries, and then also the set 2 of DFM is really important. And what that means is that Mugen doesn't really have a leg to stand on or move nearly as quickly as those aforementioned fast... Well, okay, he's going for a kill.
Cue up the Black Sabbath, because that's paranoia coming out, but it's not going to be quite enough yet. The flash away from Ace means it's just mid laners trading those summons around Hollow with the roam straight to mid. Definitely offers a bit of support, but Mugen's in the top side. Could look for a gank here. Bestie could be a little bit wary because there's still some DFM members in the river. Ebby has lost Meganar, doesn't have flash, could get traded on, but as we said, not a lot of CC here.
I don't think you can go for that. You know, again, you've lost mid lane priority. There is a Realm Warp available. Mugen, you have 6. Probably don't want to be here, though, buddy.
Oh boy, he's going to try and quick draw away. There's the Realm Warp, though. They're coming forwards for this. In comes Arya, but he's under tower a little bit, taking a lot of damage. Has to be aware of the collateral damage. That comes through. He needs to be aware of that option. As collateral damage already down, is probably safe at this point. I thought that was still available, but was not. Arya, a little bit too aggressive under tower.
I mean, Hollow, 1 level up, would have had the ult, which had the damage to kill Arya. So, luckily, V3 get away with that play. DFM also spared a couple of blushes, though. They went deep for that. They went very deep. They do get the summoner out of Mugen. They are, however, going to lose the Herald to that said player. And the neutral objective, the very first one in this grand finals of 2021 spring, is going to go to V3.
And it looked pretty good for DFM, then it really didn't. And V3 will capitalize on that slightly scuffed play.
They will. What is the after effects of this, though? Utapon has been getting a lot of solo
Oh,
farm.
yes.
If you ever sit, Hollow alone, which you probably won't because this is the farm Kench and the fasting center, then Utapon is just going to absolutely destroy them. What this means is that you're going to have a Utapon with very high solo XP, going to get to that max rank of that Q very quickly, going to have it evolved very quickly. That means that DFM, when they're making these more versatile, across the map, off-the-cuff plays, are going to have a very strong AD carry to back them up with.
Aussie's warming up the vocal cords again because the paranoia is coming through, but it's into a gravity well, which buys a lot of space. The damage turnaround is huge, but still flashing out means that he is safe, but now Ace is now in trouble as well. Aria stepping forwards. Ebby's going to try and fight his way for another kill. That'll be the not quite getting it because of a heal. Where did that come from? Boulder Toss should surely secure it. And Ebby is on point. Strike 2.
I guess, I mean, you're looking at the Time Warp Tonic, giving him a little bit of extra HP just at the end of that play. Still, an extra kill for the Gnar. It's an extra kill for this all-star top lane of Ebby, who is on the board on his favored champion pick. Aria using that relentless shove that Ryze can give you to come out to an advantage in pressure and roam timings against V3, and they're using it to get kills.
And Ebby doesn't even lose the wave. Cog gets it there and available for him. That's going to be a flash in. Muji's going to be around though, and this could be the danger. Dawning Shadow comes through, and Ace surely picks that one up. Nicely played by V3 in the top lane.
Really good slap back from V3. They know that Ebby is going to be there. There is a counter teleport from Ryze if they wanted to.
They've got a Herald as well.
And now they have themselves their Herald to chuck in a double wave into that top lane turret. Get all of the plates there if they want to stick around. Of course, Ebby doesn't have the TP to respond there. Cog flashing in. It is gold onto your Karma, which is less good, but you're denying resources from Ebby, who did just get themselves 2 kills. I think V3 are very happy with that.
They are indeed, and then more importantly, the gold goes onto your Graves, who you do want to get ahead in a matchup like this. He's the other carry. If you're going to pick a Graves in the current meta, you want it working.
By the way, if you look at that phase rush coming in there on the Iron Spike whip for Muujin, this is a return of the Stridebreaker Graves we had seen once before. I'm forgetting the game that it was in. Reiner now going and see if he can land something onto Utapon.
He gets the exhaust down, looking to get the Devour down. There is the killer instinct for Utapon to get away and will get out of range. Stays alive, but the ultimate now burnt from Utapon in the bot lane.
And there are players who are very familiar with the solo kill potential of the Tahm Kench, particularly in the solo lanes. Ebby was a notorious top lane Tahm Kench in years past. In fact, actually, Cog has only beaten Ebby as a player twice. He has played him about 40 to 50 times. Can't find all of those games on record, sadly. And one of the few games which he did win in those 2 games was against his top lane Tahm Kench, you know.
There you go.
Yeah. Back in Season 6 against, when he was on Radical Jester and Ebby was on 7th Heaven.
There you go. Some history from years past. Game state as it stands, about 1,000 gold in the lead for V3, primarily off the back of that Herald play, which is giving them the advantage. And what a nice Herald play it was too.
And it was. So, still a lot of solo XP and gold being put into the pockets of Utapon, Aria, and Ebby, all hoovering up a lot of gold across the map. And this is one of the things which is so important about this team. Joshi talked about this on the analyst desk, saying, yeah, okay, well, you've got Aria in this team when Ebby and Utapon are so used to getting resources, but it doesn't feel like Ebby and Utapon have been starved. And this is partly why. DFM as a team, much like the Season 5 LGD, very good at picking up all these different bits of farm. Muujin gonna get out with the Stridebreaker completion. Steel, though, continuing the chase.
It is a little bit, but an end of the line suggests that chase will be ended right there. Has got himself a honey fruit to top his HP bar back up, but Muujin will take the blue buff and get out, but look who's in mid lane! Paranoia is here, Kazu trying to come in behind, looking for something himself. There's the showstopper away from tower. Ace doesn't have that much far to go. The Haymaker's there, but they can't quite get enough damage. Kazu goes down, but it'll be a trade back. Aria now needs to get out, though, is the problem, and will do! Collateral damage is enough! The burn gets it, and that's a 2-for-1 in favor of V3.
Close run stuff, but DFM super over-forcing. There's a flash on Ace. You don't have yourself the Stridebreaker just yet on Steel, so you don't have the extra shutdown and close out potential in these fights. You also don't have Utapon roaming to the play. It's all well and good having a leader on your AD carry, but you need them to be there if you want to utilize it. V3 coming out to an early game advantage between plates and now with kills.
And that puts V3 up to about a 2,000 gold lead. We'll see this all again. It looks like Kazu's got himself a nice pocket of vision to get on to Ace, who stepped a long way forwards, but it's just not enough.
No, it isn't, because the Facebreaker doesn't land first, so Kazu doesn't really get to use that. Grav Field means that there's no real further chase potential there. Aria does get in, but, well, as we were saying, you can have a lead on your AD carry, but one of them has a global and the other one has a semi-global and is not nearly close enough without that second and third rank of the Killer Instinct. V3 rolling with the punches, skirmishing well, and are not taking those hits lying down.
They are not. It does cost Ace a wave in mid, of course, which does suck for him. Puts him down about 30, and he dies, which isn't great. But this Graves continuing to be a menace, an increasing menace at that point, at that rate as well. As we said, 1-0 and 3, farming well, got the Herald Gold as well. He's a pretty rich Graves.
He is. So, obviously completed those Ninja Tabi as well. Means that against against Nocturne, definitely has the ability to make them sweat. Make them stand there and say, hang on, wait, do I actually want to take this? Because if you are in a losing situation, suddenly you're slowed, and against the phase rush procs from Mugen, Graves can very much shut you down. Now the question for me is, DFM, you've tried to force on Ace multiple times now. He doesn't have the flash again. Yes, you do have the paranoia. Do you just go for that again, cookie cutter play, or actually, is there a point now where you can start shoving that, shoving that pressure around the map, throwing your weight around a little bit, because this dragon's coming up, and you'd really like to get what is so important in these pro games, an early dragon stack.
Indeed, DFM got the first one off an early play down towards that bot river, but you just saw V3 secure the Scuttle Crab, and maybe look to contest here. Mugen's around, but DFM just don't want to give him too much room to get into this river best they can.
So, still have the Scuttle Crab vision to V3. They're losing pink wards, they're losing wards in general. This is a 5-man stack
Steals
from
off
both
vision.
teams.
They don't know he's necessarily in there. There's the showstopper. That's a decent one. Kazu gets a massive face breaker as well. The Gravity Well doing a lot of work, but Youthpod over the backside gets Victor. He's dead. So is Hollow. It's a double, of course, to Ebby's Gnar. Now Mugen trying to flash away with the phase rush, but in comes Ebby to Gnar him back into the wall. And it is a rock and a hard place that will be V3's demise. DFM move to 8 and 4 in the game. They'll grab themselves a second dragon, and that one was clean as you like.
Raise your kazoos! We have a huge play coming in from the support of DFM. We talked about the duality of this player coming into this series. We get to see both on show. First, that awkward mid lane play, and the superb, awesome ultimate coming out of this set to set up that play with, again, that face breaker coming in huge at the end of it. He's tanky enough to really be a bulky bulwark for DFM in the opening stages of these fights, and V3 just could not buy space to get Cog with those multiple shields turning around the fight. You're right, there was a vision deficit for V3 heading into this, and Cog just wasn't there.
Oh.
You don't get an AoE shield across your members. You don't have Senna W even landing at that point. Youthpon heads in and says, hang on, this is kind of free, and it absolutely is. Cog gets no value out of the Karma at this point in the game, where that shield probably would have had an extra, effectively a health bar and a half even across the entirety of that fight if they had managed to get 1 or 2 AoE shields across everyone. They don't have that HP, don't have their enchanter in place. V3 fall apart.
They do, and that is now the lead for DFM fairly handily. You saw that damage there, and well, Nocturne, and of course this Gnar absolutely destroying the damage. Now Cog might be in a spot of bother here. They know the hell's going on, but Aria, the Everfrost, the Roots, EQ.
Well, and they're turning up their EQ to raise the base and drop it right on Cog's head, as he's now sat at 0-3. He doesn't have the items to survive himself in a 1vx scenario. He wants to be the death ball and be, being that control tower, not being focused on himself. Aria, Steel, winning out in that play. And yes, V3 get themselves a Herald, but what's the cost for it? They've lost themselves a kill already. They're losing a wave to tower on bot side. Seems like, again, this is going to be a lower value Herald. And surprise, surprise, it's happened quite a lot this season.
I've also got to call out at this point, this Graves, yes, he's got the Herald, yes, he's tried to get himself ahead in the game, but actually, he's not actually managed to get that much of a farm lead. He started a little bit of a discrepancy. He's only a camp ahead of this Nocturne, which is not what you want if you pick this carry jungler.
Exactly. Well, I mean, Steel is the most tenured Nocturne player in the LJL. I'm just looking at his stats. It's his second most played champion of all time. This is his 20th Nocturne game across his pro career.
Whoa.
And, well, one of the things about Nocturne is that you gotta know your farming routes. You gotta know how to efficiently get that XP, because a Nocturne ahead in XP is a Nocturne that is
level
ahead
6
in the game.
Yeah,
exactly. It gives them the chance to impact the game that much earlier. Is such a pivotal moment for that champion. Has been pathing well, like we were saying, very good at reacting across the map. Mugen has not been given any free breakfast, and I wish I had breakfast too early of a start for me, as we were saying. But V3 now have to play against a mid-game lead after the early game lead for them has slipped away.
Yes, it did. And the problem with a lot of the early game leaders, it was somewhat artificial, right? Like, it was the plates, it was the heralds. But it wasn't like they managed to get big experience leads, and DFM are pulling the trigger. Paranoia is down.
He's done it
Doom
again!
and Darkness. They're trying to get in, but of course they've got a Tom Cage to make things a bit more difficult. Steel now having to get back out with the Stride Breaker, but in goes Ebby. He's looking for a big Mega Knight, doesn't really find it. He's now in danger. He doesn't have a flash. He doesn't have a way out, and he goes down. It's a big shutdown, but it's onto Hollow. Aria gets out, but this time it's DFM going a little too deep, not managing to secure enough CC.
Observe what happens when Karma is at the play and you don't get your perfect engage. The shields come through. The HP bar's not nearly in his favor for DFM this time.
Takes a lot of damage, and they try to come through with the Abyssal Voice, but they can't punish as much as they would like to V3, and that's what this team comp does have from V3. Some fantastic anti-dive between the Tahm Kench, between the Senna, between the Karma Shields, and of course the Gravity Well. Does get very difficult to keep on these members unless you blow them up absolutely instantaneously.
Absolutely. And DFM kind of falling apart a little bit, and then there was a real chance that you did have a big collapse coming in. Muujin finds still on the side, though.
He's still got flash. I think he's probably going to be just fine. He's got a heal as well. Now Muujin is in danger, but Cutopon can't quite find the angle. Lost vision a little bit, but Arya has phase rush as well. And that's all without Ebby. That was a 4v5.
That it was. And again, you look at this play and you think, oh wow, Arya could really get caught out here, but then Phase Rush comes through, managed to escape from that play. Sadly, the Gnar doesn't have that same ability. He uses a lot of things to go in. What happens at the start of it? You did have the root landing onto Kazu. Hollow is too far away from Reiner to be saved by the Devour. Doesn't need it though. Manages to flash out. And Steel and Ebby really struggle to close the distance. And Ace's gravity fields so far have been sublime at disengaging the play. As we come back to live, looks like DFM have taken the option to split the map just a little bit more, get themselves their third turret of the game, though, and this is one of the things that the LJL typically as a region has struggled against. How do you get advantages outside of those team fights? How do you split the map? Well, DFM have themselves strong side lanes right now, and they're getting some of it there.
Of course, you've got to be a little aware, of course, of the Abyssal Voyage coming in to make those side lanes not the 1v1s you were perhaps expecting, but yeah, again, you've also got a Nocturne, which can make things a little bit more even again. Cloud Drake has spawned. This would be third Drake for DFM. They're starting up. Scuttle Crab Vision means that V3 know it's going on.
Kazu has Hex Flash.
There's the Hex Flash coming over. Dragon is secured. Now Kazu might look for a fight, but the quick draw away means that Muujin can get out. Realm Warp into the back. Potentially Ebby gets a big Gnar onto Muujin, who does get devoured. There's the Showstopper in the backline, but Kazu once again, so damn deep, has a Haymaker to 1-for-1 right now. Steel now trying to get his way out. Ebby in trouble, trying to get his way to danger, but Muujin's just going to run him down.
That he is. Muujin gets the double. DFM get the objective, but they don't quite get into the backline in the way that they want. Why is this working out? Arya now needs to run. He's going to get himself the root, though.
That's a big error for us, and there's Yutapon. Reiner needs to be a bit afraid here. Has got himself thick skin, but now that's popped. He's got himself a shield. Arya going to get over the wall best he can. Muujin might come over as well. Misses the smoke screen, and Arya's going to have to try and outplay best he can. He's going to have to be a little bit close. Muujin pretty low, but here comes the rest of V3 with a Dawning Shadow, allowing the shutdown to go the way of Reiner.
Okay, so Ryze can run, but he can only run in one direction in that case, and it ain't to safety. V3, they're managing to find fights and corral DFM so they can't get flanks. This is the problem with DFM's comp versus V3's, and we're starting to see at this point. V3, if they keep things, and this is a term which I have used so much this split, in a singular directional style in terms of denying those flanks, V3 can put down the grab field, can follow up with all their slows and reset the fight with Karma, and it becomes very, very difficult. Look at this. DFM running straight down the throat of V3. Yeah, they do get the Gnar onto Muujin. It's just not enough. Reiner uses the Devour, and then suddenly thinking, okay, Muujin's just going to get out of this and be that secondary AD carry. It is at the cost of Hollow. There is only one W for the Tahm Kench in these fights and a long cooldown, but that's more than enough at this point for V3 to play around the jungle carry.
It's not necessarily a fight that DFM had to take. They got the dragon. They could have gone out. They could have gotten out there, but they still went for it. They're still at soul point. They've still got a lead, but it's not as big a one as it was even 2 minutes ago.
I mean, Kai'Sa does not beat out Senna in a front-to-back fight. We talked about when you have Karma and there is no enchanter on the other side. Most of the time you win front-to-back fights. You have the Tahm Kench to stop the initial engage, if it is, again, right down your gullet. The Karma stops that, and well, you know, the Karma and the Tahm Kench kind of team up together and stop that from being very effective. DFM need to find angles. They have the side lane pressure. Don't just do your homework and get a flank.
Absolutely, and they've still got some champions that are very strong. Second items in for Ryze, second items in for Kai'Sa, Sterak's in for Gnar. They're definitely getting there, but, Mujin now with 2 items, Putrifier in for Cog, and that could prove pretty challenging. Reiner increasingly tanky on this fed Tahm Kench as well, does get pretty frustrating. The AI is still giving a strong vote over to DFM, because of course they're still at Soul Point, they've still got good scaling, they've still got advantages.
But sadly for them, it's a Cloud Soul Point. It's nothing more than that V3 speeding up, looking for the engage, but this is the lack of CC. Kazu has flash. Is it enough? He's getting out for now.
He's got a phase rush, but now he needs to try and find his way out to safety. He's going to have to play pretty tricky here. He'll have Hex Flash, of course, to try and find his way out to safety, but he's being chased around in circles. But here's the paranoia, and now they might have actually split up. They're going to go to the back line there as well. Down goes Cog! And Epi's here with the Mega Gnar as well. It's 2 for 1. At this moment in time, Hollow is dead as well. Completely eviscerated. Mujin trying to step forward and get Kazu. Will get that one, at least. Utapon very low. And that'll be Arya being spat out under tower, but Reiner will trade his life for it. Double kill for Arya. Mujin's the one man left alive.
It's a 4 for 2.
What?
Turret ends up killing Arya on the back end of it. Mujin's on vision.
Oh, he's now going to get out with a very swift flash, but now he's being chased away. He needs to try and find his way out of this one. It's going to be pretty difficult, but I don't know how easy it'll be for him to get away. He has got smites, so he can try and heal his way up on this red buff, which might be his option, but the autos are here. He doesn't quite have the healing, and smoke screen ain't enough. Shut down, and finally an ace for DFM.
So 5 for 3, all things said and done, after Arya takes too many turret shots. The slow from the Tongue Lash after the Devour ends up being enough. Not sure if he ended up taking random aggro after that point. What happens? V3 struggle to find significant engage. Kazu plays around the vision, well, the lack thereof of V3 in their own jungle, manages to find Hollow out of position, just walks too far up. This is one of the problems when you don't set up your battle lines effectively with the Tahm Kench. You don't get to Devour. Hollow has the flash, but he just flashes into his own death. Now with DFM using Mujin's death timer, they're starting a Baron.
They absolutely are, because remember, he died so late that he's not going to be around for this Baron. It's already down super low. It's a Kai'Sa to Ryze. They shred this. Paranoia's out as well, so they don't even have that much vision. It'll be Baron easy as you like. The steal will not come through. Detonation FocusMe get the Baron off a delayed kill on Mujin.
And I present to you desynchronized death timers. A lot of D's there, and a bit of a D grade for V3 on the Baron approach. Couldn't really do much. That's not necessarily their fault. Mujin dead, and then DFM managed to capitalize. It does mean that DFM give up the dragon, but given actually that they don't really care about that dragon's soul for now, I think they'll take this to use their 1-3-1 with the 7-kill Gnar, and of course the Arya's Ryze, who has got a number of items too, to start tearing down those inner turrets and maybe get themselves an inhibitor turret too.
They got a big wave crashing in towards that top lane. V3 have yet to be able to back because they've got to deal with the mid wave, and that's going to mean with Baron empowered minions and a couple items, Gnar will make short work of that inner tier 2. Kazu playing gatekeeper in the red side jungle means that V3 don't have an easy route into that lane, through the jungle rather, into that lane. To clarify, and Utapon's hanging around as well. That's not a bad little Void Seeker, but Ace wisely backing away will not get Killer Instincted on, but it leaves Steel alone with the tower in mid lane, and the shove continues.
So most of the time when you're pushing onto inner turrets, you think, actually it's kind of hard because people can rotate very quickly. But because DFM have so many semi-globals, when you have, second rank of Kai'Sa and, of course, the Nocturne ultimate too, your engage range means that you can just ping between turrets very quickly. DFM might just respond to this.
But there's no hard CC, they just realm warp away!
And they have that option too. They could use, of course, the Ryze ult there too. He's about to hit level 16. That's a big point in power. DFM, they managed to get themselves the 1-3-1, or at least the kind of the 3-2. Not even got anyone in the bot wave. Letting that happen naturally. And they're just crushing down the structures with their advanced globals.
Mujin steps forward to try and get some autos down. But at this point, there's this go in from Kazu. He gets a decent option, but he's going to go very low. Seen that one a few times. Kazu, are you sure? Ace survives with the shields. Down goes Utapon as well. And it's 2 dead for DFM. The only way V3 are getting these fights is when DFM take him. And now Reiner stepping forwards with so much speed. The last embrace there as well. He'll fall. And that'll be Steel's first death of the game. Arya and Ebby, the only people left alive from Detonation FocusMe.
Utapon, Gale forces the wrong way. Chooses to try and escape instead of securing the kill onto Hollow. Either way, it doesn't matter. 3 for none. DFM's Baron push will end here. They will take themselves a mid lane inhibitor turret, I think. And they do take the top lane inhibitor as well. How does this start? Well, how else could it start? It's Kazu looking for something yet again. This is just the coin flip player in the LJL right now. He gets absolutely shredded. And as we see, Ace gets the Q. And then we see Utapon. Gale Force is out of the fight, out of the range of Ace. Does not get the final kill.
That's
The
a very fast frog.
It is a very fast frog. Not fast enough to shut down the Rise yet again. Imagine what this would be like if you had something more like that, Leona. I mean, of course, it doesn't really help the fact that you want to disengage onto your carries. V3 struggling to find that engage, though they are keeping it competitive. They are keeping DFM just a little bit... Well, they're holding them to account.
They are. They got the Cloud Drake as well. So it's not Cloud Soul yet for DFM. And yes, DFM still scale exceptionally well. They've still got 3 items on pretty much everybody that matters. But there's Graves, 3 items, GA third, pretty strong. There's the double items in for the Karma we mentioned. Senna still scaling. I've not seen her soul count this game, so I have no idea where she's at with that.
I think it flicked up. I think it's at about 100 now.
Okay, pretty strong.
Remember that one. Ebby running away, going to get tagged by the slow. But again, V3, they want to death ball, but they don't have the necessary engage to really take fights on their own terms. They need to wait for DFM to overstep, which luckily for them, they have a couple of times.
Kazu has definitely decided to rename to Leroy Jenkins.
Oh, that's not overstepping, that's overleaping.
Yeah, it's just like, there is a full Leroy Jenkins mode.
It's like, that's one small step for... No, that is not one small step for man. You have reached Mars already, my friend.
There's one giant int for mankind, apparently. To the moon is not only for certain stocks, it's also for Kazu, who decides it's time to press showstopper into the middle of the enemy team. And in fairness, you understand that maybe he's a decent...
Feels it. An impulse. He must go. His people need him.
We've heard of Lee Syndrome. I need to think of one for Set now. Apparently, as Ebby's going in, he's got an option. Stride Breaker's there. There's the Paranoia, but the root will come through with Karma coming through. Big shields there. I mean, they get out. But Kazu's left alone! Why? Why are you doing this?
Why are you doing this indeed? Now
Hang
they
on.
have... Whoa,
okay, that might be a bit of a return to the favour. Ryder goes golden. He's got himself a stopwatch. That's a beautiful freeze frame for him. Ebby needs to keep going. He's got himself a stride break and will get out. And my cry of despair.
Yeah, that's, yes. I wish I could break that down more. It's just a disconnect. Maybe you think, actually, Ebby can flash in back over the gravity field and go for an ult at that point. I just don't think you can take that fight at that point. You have yourself another inhibitor down. We see the timers there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. 1.5 minutes left on even the most recent inhibitor, well, the latest inhibitor taken, rather. And that means that V3 will have... they'll be seeding pressure across the top half of the map for this dragon spawn. Again, I don't think V3 need to fight this. In fact, actually, I would almost suggest them leave this dragon, let Soul go over, then go take a fight around the Elder. That one tends to be the game-ending one. Definitely not a Cloud Soul in this kind of circumstance.
We're also going to be aware, of course, that Baron will be spawning in 25 seconds, which will be an important one to be available for, because they're giving that up at this point as well with 2 inhibitors down, potentially something of a death knell as well. Decent wave clear between the top 4 members of V3, but DetonatioN Focus is saying, screw this, we're going to shove through mid.
They because DFM have stuff like the Realm Warp to taxi minions even further forward if V3 overcommit, it's really dangerous for them to keep going.
Aria's going to get himself Realm Warped out. That's a lot of damage out
Level
from the
16
Overlords.
Rise.
He does a lot of work there. Of course, he's not going for the highest damage build, no death cap or anything. He's got himself a Seraph's 4th, but there's a Morello. There's a Banshee's Veil in there. Paranoia popped to make sure that V3 back away from the Baron, and without a lack of vision, DFM will come straight back over, and they will shred this real quickly.
Let's see how quick they can burn it. They do have a Kai'Sa, very strong at taking Baron. Mugen needs to get here quickly. He keeps quick drawing forward, but they haven't got the Reiner close enough.
They haven't got him close enough. He's going to get down. That's secured by
Rise.
Aria, of course. They just burst it down as quick as you like, but that will be Baron over. That will be Cloud Soul over. 2 neutral objectives in a matter of moments, and V3 couldn't answer either.
Yeah. So often we have referred to DFM as kind of the G2 of the LJL. They're a trident team in the style of, G2, IG. They have carries in every lane you can name. They're also a team which have the experience and, the tenure to make these late game macro plays, which other teams wouldn't take so quickly to. DFM see the opening, they manage to problem solve on the fly, and they get themselves a Baron. Maybe they can use this to close out the game.
Well, perhaps this is where most of the advantage of DFM lies. It's in the levels. Aria, Utapon, Ebby,
several
all
thousand
so far ahead in terms of experience, if nothing else. Utapon is level 17 to Versus, Hollow's 13 right now.
Yeah. And now you have a Cloud Soul, 10% bonus move speed. You already got Stride Breaker on your top 2 members, Rise with the Phase Rush on your set 2, and a Gale Force on Utapon. Pretty much everyone is packing movement speed, and that has just been buffed up. This is not an insignificant Cloud Soul. It's not game ending. In fact, the Baron is probably the more important thing for now because those minions maybe can split V3 across the map. But DFM do have themselves more power and more resources in the tank to take these fights in the late game.
Nocturne with Cloud Soul. He presses Paranoia and he becomes Mach 5. Hell, he's got a Stride Breaker on top of that as well.
Exactly. Because the Gale Force and the Stride Breaker, with that's 3 of them out of the 5 for DFM, give you move speed already. It's just doubling down on a stat that DFM already have a lot of. Arya is safe to push in the top side. Again, they just don't have the CC to really engage and shut down a 1-3-1. 1-3-1s are often so dangerous in the late game. V3 can't shut them down though.
And he's got a Cloud Soul, so it's not even like the Realm Warp's on the longest cooldown, already down by about a quarter of the way as I'm speaking about it. I'm probably just shy in fairness, and that makes a big difference. Still a minute or so left on this Baron buff. Mugen going in, trying to get as much damage as he can. Kazu going in, goes down straight away. I thought the V3 wouldn't have a lot of engagement, but Mugen just to run of them, trying to get in. Ebby also down low. He's going to get the Mega Null release, but now Reiner shoved to the wall. No stopwatch left. Into everybody. GA popped. Reiner dead. Ingo to the backline. And Utapod and Ebby shred everybody else. And Mugen tried to find the win. He'll find his death. And Detonation FocusMe secure game 1. It was their lead to have, but V3 at least made him sweat.
V3 trying to be a little bit more like V300 and find a battle at that one choke point, make a Thermopylae of it. Well, you know how that went though. It looked okay for the Spartans, but they did lose that battle.
And they might not be the Persians, they might not be immortal in this game, but they still come away with the win. Good stuff from DFM. We liked the draft. We liked most of the play, but it wasn't like V3 didn't have their own points in this game, and I think Kazu definitely showing a little bit of his duality, as we mentioned in this game.
Raise your kazoos. Yeah, I mean, that support player was often on both ends of the good and bad plays. Can't wait to see how this series unfolds with that in mind.
Absolutely. We are going to go to a quick break here, guys. While we do play a bit of musical chairs, switch over to the analyst desk. I get myself, up to date with what their thoughts are through. Alex goes grab himself a coffee, and we're back in about a minute or two to break this game down. Detonation FocusMe currently lead the series 1-0. See you in a moment or two. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The musical chairs are complete, and I am back with Counterfeit, Maple Street, and Joshi for our first analyst desk of the day. Gents, DFM come out with a Game 1 victory, but V3 weren't there to make it easy, were they, Counterfeit?
Well, no, I mean, I think we did get to see these flashes of brilliance from V3. In particular, one of the moments that stood out to me was the tower dive they were able to put together, which was honestly really spectacular. We get a chance to look back on exactly how they did it. I mean, this kind of play from V3 was exactly what we were hoping to see. Unfortunately, this didn't really manifest too much in the rest of the game, but in this moment, V3 looked like a team who could take over the game.
And that, unfortunately, in some ways, was one of their kind of slightly limited proactive plays. And Joshi, we were just talking in that break there that you had some thoughts specifically around Muujin in this game, and you weren't sure on some of the stuff.
Yeah, so we all obviously got to touch on the fact that V3's draft had zero proactive crowd control. They had Senna W, so you got some speculative stuff. You have Tom Kench Q, which is not going to get you a lot of kills. And then you have Smokescreen. And that's really about it in terms of your ways to get started. So, you're looking at V3. They're a composition that needs to get ahead. They need to get objectives first in order to control the choke points because they cannot walk in if DFM are there first. And so one of the interesting things that we saw coming out from Muujin at the beginning, he went red, Raptors, Wolves, blue, bottom lane. He skips Krugs, he skips Gromp, and he shows up bottom lane before DFM are really ready. It sets the pace. We're going to go for a lot of ganks. We're going to get a lot of early opportunities to go for fights. But it screws up his jungle pathing really, really badly. You saw Kazu went to pick up the Krugs. You saw that they end up losing a lot. And Muujin, for a surprising part of the game, was down in CS until, he just becomes Graves. But the other big thing we got to look at is, guys, this guy built Stridebreaker on Graves. Like, I see your faces. You're kind of giving me blank stares because there's not a whole lot more to talk about this.
We've seen it once before, and it was a similar kind of okay. I mean, maybe it's more chase down potential. I know Maple, Counterfeit, you guys were both saying, obviously we said lack of CC in this draft. Maybe the Stridebreaker with the Karma behind is just more ways to keep Graves on top of you, Maple. I don't know whether you've got your own thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's an additional crowd control, but Graves was definitely pretty vital to that team comp. You have the Karma plus the Graves as a combo, maybe to get some 2v2 fighting off. And if the Graves doesn't get insanely far ahead to where he can invade and start contesting buffs, you don't get enough value from that combination. Funneling the Karma spells into the Graves, you're not getting enough.
Yeah. I think there's another very vocal member of our League of Legends community who, talks a lot about solo lane Graves and the ability to build a lot of lifesteal and just sustain tank your way through all these fights. And he had the tools to do that, right? He had the Karma Shields, who was building support for him. He had the Senna heals coming through, and he had the Tom Kench. He was very safe, but he needs to do the damage. And that's what worries me about this kind of play coming out from Muujin, is when you're trying to carry the game, you can't do it by going a low damage build of Stridebreaker into Black Cleaver, especially if you need to be ahead in the entire game. If you're going to commit to this kind of also style, you need to commit to actually winning the early game. You don't do that by building Stridebreaker.
Don't do it by building Stridebreaker. Probably don't do it by dropping 10 CS to try and get an early gank off, even if it does get your center at first blood. Does put you always behind when you're supposed to be the carry. Speaking of some interesting moments, we kind of mentioned Muujin might be important in the pregame. Another player we kind of called out to a T was Kazu, who had some amazing plays and some real suspect ones. Maple, you've coached the guy. What was going on in the set?
It was very suspicious. I mean, he's a bit out of practice, and it's his first set game, maybe ever. And I mean, in competitive,
Maple, calm down.
It's more pick, but he made some really silly mistakes. In this clip, he has a stun right there, but then he uses his ult and misses the crowd control part of it.
Yeah, that's a bit rough for sure. And of course, we saw some amazing stuff the other way around, where he manages to pull Hollow away, having played a ring around the Rosie, trying to get his way out of danger. But it was a mix of stuff from Kazu. I mean, this is the next clip, Counterfeit. I mean, this was the other side of it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were so many moments, and we'll see a little bit more of it later on, where it seemed like we maybe would get a salvage in later fights, but I mean, yeah, as you can see here, that given the opportunity, DFM just absolutely roll through everything. I think this was the moment in the game when my heart just dropped for V3. I was like, there's no way they come back from getting clean aced. I mean, it's still, 16 minutes in, but the morale hit there has got to be enormous.
Absolutely, it was pretty huge. That face is just majestic. We love it.
Tells us so much, right? It's just like, me? Did I do that? And sometimes it's like, oh, did I do that? Right? You get the Steve Urkel, the throwbacks, where it's like, oh man, somebody really screwed up. But it's also like, oh, was that me? Did I just win us the game? It's like, yes, Kazu, you get the good, you get the bad, you get the duality of Kazu. It was interesting to see, but it is an opportunity for, as we looked at V3, they can take these opportunities where Kazu is, flipping tails and actually win some of these team fights, but they just weren't able to do that with the composition they drafted for themselves.
Absolutely. Okay, at this point, I think we've got one last little point before we cut to a bit of a break. Maple, do you want to take us over some of what was going on around these dragons? I know you had your own thoughts about this, and this is kind of where DFM found their way to a victory, and then of it, and V3 just not quite there on time.
Yeah, I mean, to beat DFM, you have to play out these team fights a lot better. And if you draft a team comp that is just all the zone control, you have to get to the objective first. Because the Victor can't really walk forward. The Senna doesn't do that very well either. But if everyone is coming towards them, they have so much potential for controlling that dragon and not losing the soul at 28 minutes. So DFM's going to teamfight you. You have to just completely understand what your goals are in your team comp.
That possibly was a little bit lacking, unfortunately, for V3 in this game. Some slightly suspect choices from Muujin, some unfortunately late turn of some of these objectives, and DFM on the other side finding some real classy engages about half the time. Either way, they find themselves to a game 1 victory, some strong laning phase, and 1-0 up in this series. I'm going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have game 2 for you. Stick around, don't go anywhere.